Hi guys. So today we're going to explore how the role of publishers has changed and what we believe the future is going to look like. Our panel has come together to discuss the subject from their own perspective, all coming from different backgrounds and types of publisher and all being impacted in very different ways. Clearly, the current COVID situation has had a massive impact on the world of affiliate marketing, as it has on every sector of basically every industry. But we want to look at where the impact's been mostly felt. Has it accelerated and forced change that was already on the agenda? Has it helped more clearly separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak? And ultimately, what does the future look like for an industry that's always prided itself on being inclusive and a place where every type of publisher has a part to play? So we have a lot of questions. We'll try to answer at least some of them. Personally, I'm looking forward to hearing a diverse range of views and opinions and having a lively and informative debate. So if I can introduce my panel now. We have Heather Peebles, who is Head of Affiliate Partnerships at employee benefit site Reward Gateway. We have Colin Carter, Director of weathertravel.com, a specialist travel and holiday site. And finally, we have Alastair Campbell, who looks after digital PR at RebBrain. So thank you all for being here. If I can start off with my first question, and I'm going to aim it at Alastair initially. RebBrain work in CSS, which is predominantly with online retail brands, which is part of the economy that has continued to perform well throughout COVID crisis. Has that allowed you to continue what you're doing? Has it required a more cautious approach and a more strategic approach?
I think there's two things that possibly you could divide that into. One is the impact, the direct impact on retail. The massive shift to e-commerce obviously drove lots of growth. And at the same time, you had retailers disappearing overnight. So you had pushing retailers asking for more and more and more. And then you had retailers who actually owed us money and actually disappeared overnight or went into liquidations. And that initial phase of COVID just after lockdown was very tempestuous. Overall, though, initially we saw a great amount of growth as retail online really grew. And I don't know if you saw, but I did a video about how it was gloves and masks, and then it was weights and weight benches and all that kind of stuff. And then it went on to cycles. So we saw this growth there, but we had to be more cautious as to who we would do business with, like what was their credit rating and how good were they to pay? Because obviously you're going to see the money 30 or 60 or 90 days after the transaction itself.
Cool, great. And when you're looking at sort of how that worked, was it a conversation with the clients? Were you looking at advertisers and saying, essentially, is it based around trust, or are you basing your decisions on, we've worked with this guy previously in the past, we've kind of understand how they're working? There's always going to be an element of trust, but did that come into your decision making at all?
Yes, I think so. I think where we had a long-standing relationship and payment was prompt and short-term, then we knew those advertisers were stronger. We did take some precautionary measures around certain brands who didn't put a lot of focus on it and were all of a sudden asking for it. But where we had done work in the past, payment terms dragged on and on and on, or anyone who'd missed payment terms, basically, we actually had a bit of a little amber flag saying, okay, this has gone from 60-day terms to like 120 anyway. What's that going to look like if they get adversely impacted by the closing of their retail stores? But overall, we took quite a holistic approach and treated everyone as if there's going to be more e-commerce, there's going to be more online retail, therefore there's going to be more revenue for them and therefore to pay the affiliate networks.
I think you mentioned previously that you saw some sites were being very strong, other sites were a little bit more cautious around kind of how they were acting. They weren't sure what the future was going to be like. So were there any clients that you looked at and they were doing well, and then all of a sudden they said, actually, we don't want to promote through the channel anymore, it doesn't make sense for us?
Yes, I think there's two types there. There's the type where the stock was running out so fast that they were starting to pull back on their activities in CSS. And then you had the other type who were just being cautious in general, because obviously we have no insight into the rest of their trading activity.
So client decisions, obviously, major role to play in kind of how that impacts your business. And I want to pick Heather's brain slightly on this one, because I know, Heather, you've been doing a lot with the publisher committee recently. Are you able to explain a little bit more around that and how that could potentially help give publishers a little more security when situations like this arise?
Yeah, of course. So we started the publisher board a little while ago now, and it's sort of started just from, as you would expect, many publishers going to a lot of industry-wide events, and generally as well, if any of those events are advertiser specific, you do generally see a lot of one another. So I'm particularly one, Colin, I see all the time. So naturally there's that dialogue, and equally without naming names of any advertisers specifically, but generally kind of those concerns which come around, validations, payment terms, all of those sorts of things, obviously something which are at the back of everybody's minds. So we thought that it was important to have a group, because believe it or not, we didn't really have a place for everyone to sort of voice those concerns together. We thought it was important to actually start looking at what we want from a set of publisher-wide terms, and how we can sort of look at ways of improving the current affiliate standard, because generally we've all got that common interest. And we want to just make sure that we've got that full set of transparency for everyone concerned, and kind of make it a fairer playing field for all as well. So the main aim of the publisher board is really to sort of look at what we currently want to see from our terms, what standard we want to set in place, what currently, what our network's doing as it stands, but also what can we look at in terms of promoting that best practice, what is something that we want to sort of herald as this is what we want to achieve, and all of these different topics, whether it be in-app tracking or whether it be anything to do with first-party servers or all that sort of stuff, which is obviously a huge concern. We can talk about it together, collaborate on it, and work towards that better standard for everybody.
Fantastic. To continue with you, Heather, just on my next question, the same question I asked Alastair, really. From an employee benefit point of view, obviously there's a lot of change in work culture, working from home, furlough situation having impacted businesses. And what measures have you put in place to try and mitigate any drop in engagement you might have seen from the side?
Yeah, it's been an interesting one, really, because essentially we actually haven't seen a huge drop off in engagement. I mean, we do also operate within the B2B market as well, so not necessarily all loyalty partners do. But so, of course, we've seen the in-store arm drop off completely, especially when you look at cinemas as a great example of that. But what we have is just seen different uptake from different other verticals. So, as you wouldn't be surprised, food and drink delivery services just skyrocketed, especially wine in general, and things like broadband as well saw a huge increase. And then, of course, travel completely dropped off a cliff. So it's just been changed around quite a lot. So we are still seeing that engagement. But what I will say as well, from an employee benefit point of view, is a lot of the companies that we cater and facilitate a scheme for, a lot of these businesses aren't really used to their employees working from home. They've obviously had to deal with a lot of their staff being furloughed. And really, they're conscious about that reduced visibility that they have as well. So they have been coming to us to sort of ask for us to help, improve that kind of engagement, and more importantly, probably improve on the well-being of their workforce as well. So I think there's a huge opportunity going forwards for employee benefits providers, sort of maximise on that well-being aspect, look at, ways in which they can sort of add comfort and make their workforce feel a lot more kind of engaged, both with the work that they're doing, but also with their colleagues, and keep that connection, which is hugely important, which is why we have reward and recognition products, which obviously any small form of recognition like e-cards or monetary awards are huge ways in order to increase that engagement, along with things like cycle to work schemes. As you can imagine, the growth for cycle to work during the pandemic was huge. And yeah, we've just been looking at ways in which we can highlight those online savings. So savings that you need necessarily more so than what you'd love. But I think, yeah, like I said before, huge opportunity to sort of make employee benefits a need to have rather than a nice to have. And I think we've used this time to sort of give that added education to advertisers on who we are as a publisher. This has been a perfect time to sort of say, these are the products that we have available. We know what your challenges are in terms of pay rises and redundancies. So here is a great alternative. This is a benefit scheme which will be a great reward to all of your employee base. It's obviously going to be a lot more cost effective for them as a business, and it's going to help their employees save on all their everyday shopping, as well as all the things that they love to be spending money on. So yeah, exciting times ahead, but also uncertain as well. So that's
I was
always
going to say, do you think that all these new learnings, the clients that you're working with at the moment, they're kind of obviously looking at ways currently to kind of keep people engaged, to keep their businesses going when things gradually get back to normal, if they kind of get back to normal, probably not as they were previously. Do you think it's a lesson learned that these people will continue to use? Are they showing that, or is it something that they're doing for the time being?
I'd like to think so. I think, yeah, we're already seeing evidence of that. But needless to say, there will be, economical pressures put on HR departments also. So it really is kind of a case of we shall see. But at the moment, we're just, having to adapt, like, most industries are, to listen to what it is that their clients need. And at the moment, that's what we're doing. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing how that evolves.
Thank you. Interesting, you mentioned how travel dropped off a cliff. I think that leads us nicely into Colin. Obviously, Colin, you work in, specifically in the travel vertical. It's probably seen the most uncertainty of any sector. Even when things look like they're getting back to normal, travel restrictions are lifted, then the next day travel restrictions aren't lifted anymore. You can see a change in an instant when cases flare up in different parts of the world. I remember speaking to you when I first started on BA, and the volcano in Iceland erupted, and there were a few days of disruption, and everyone said, "Oh God, what are we going to do? This is widespread chaos. We'll never see anything like this again, but we need to deal with it." And then now you've got the same widespread chaos, but for 6 months and ongoing. So how do you cope with that happening?
Yeah, no, it's certainly been a roller coaster. Obviously, you mentioned the volcano, and then after that we had two various terrorist attacks at various parts of the world hitting tourism, and then obviously Brexit over the last couple of years. So yeah, I think we kind of got through to January, and there was some light at the end of the tunnel with Brexit, and we thought maybe we were going to have a good year. And then the news started breaking about the coronavirus kind of cropping up in China. And we certainly saw in the early part of this year, we noticed on a regional basis that, China, Italy, Iran, those early countries that had cases immediately dropped traffic. And then as that went through and we got to lockdown, obviously the bottom fell out of the travel market. And that was, it's something that none of us have kind of dealt with before at this scale. And it certainly has been a bit of a challenge. Like most travel companies, we've just looked to try and ride out the storm with the view that people will return to leisure travel. Likelihood is that people will want to travel again. So it's just a question of getting back to where that demand is at. So we, very, very early on, decided that we needed to make some changes. So we obviously cut costs and looked to try and kind of scale back. Certainly all the brands that we were working with immediately kind of paused any activities and reduced their coverage. It became a bit more of an issue around when the furlough scheme started, and we saw travel companies obviously either furloughing staff or moving them on to customer support. They had to get a huge number of travellers back to the UK. So it was increasingly difficult to get hold of people. And obviously the networks probably found that the same. The next kind of stage was really where programs either paused, closed completely, or they reduced their commission down to zero, which doesn't certainly help us in any shape or form. So it became a bit of a wasteland. Although we did continue to kind of get sales and had traffic to the site, it was really, I guess, back, once we got through to about June time, there was a glimmer of hope, as you mentioned. And, we thought that maybe there was a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, we put a lot of time into developing domestic travel because we thought that was certainly an area that was going to recover sooner. And we also put together a section of the website around the coronavirus, because the one thing that we thought that travellers would want, it would be information about what was happening on the ground, because there's an awful lot of scaremongering going on, lots of stories in the media, and actually knowing what's going on in the ground if you are considering going away on holiday is quite important. And that's actually increased even more since quarantine and travel bans have kind of changed pretty much on a daily or weekly basis. So we put things in place. We tried to kind of minimize the costs where we could, and with a view that we would be able to ride out the storm. So we will see where that storm takes us.
A couple of questions off the back of that. You mentioned that some clients just basically stopped paying commission. That doesn't help you, like you said. How do you? Obviously, you don't feel good about it. How do you feel about kind of when clients do that? Is it about maintaining relationships, knowing that in the future, you're going to be working with these guys again because there's a finite number of travel providers, or how do those conversations tend to go?
It is quite a challenge because in many cases that they are brands that we want to be working with, but it's a question of trying to kind of navigate your way through that. Looking to highlight the brands that are still active and are still paying commission. Obviously, because we're predominantly a content website as well, it's very difficult to remove a brand temporarily, because if you can imagine the number of mentions that they have within content, that increases the maintenance that's required through the site. So you have to be a little bit pragmatic with it and just look at what's doable and what's not. Obviously then focus on those brands that are engaged in what you're trying to do, the ones that are still paying commission, the ones that are still putting out promotions that you actually have something to push. So I think it's we found a way of kind of navigating it, but it's not helping publishers at a base, and that's the challenge probably for not only networks but also agencies and brands themselves. So actually realize that it should be a partnership. It should be a two-way street. It's not just about them protecting their own their own space. And I can appreciate it's very difficult if a travel company has furloughed their marketing team and therefore there's no one to administer their affiliate program. I can understand why they do it, but obviously that doesn't make it any easier to deal with.
Sure. And Alastair mentioned earlier about payment terms, increasing and going from 30 to 60 to 90, etc. I guess with travel, you've got these massive approval periods of sales. You don't get paid until someone takes a flight. It's got to be tricky at the moment for you to plan anything, first of all, based on that normally. And I know from experience it's hard to plan based on that because you don't know when your money's coming in. But I guess secondly as well, with the flights coming on, then going off, then coming on, and people getting vouchers and being pushed back, like how's that been impacting you?
Yeah, it's a challenge because, as you say, in majority of time, whether it be a hotel, a flight, or a holiday, we don't get paid until the person's travelled. And if that person then chooses to cancel or is forced to cancel because of COVID or whatever, in most cases we are going to be losing out. And what we found is that usually it's okay that we know that there's going to be a certain amount of commission paid each month, but because there's an awful lot in the networks that basically you're just sitting there waiting to be paid, and there is no mechanism within those networks or technology platforms to report on likely payment terms. So if someone is booked a holiday for 2021, we're not going to get paid that until that time. But we've actually got no idea of how to split that up to kind of look at the cash flow and see where that revenue is coming in. So it's one of those things that we've been trying to challenge networks to try and look at, see if there's a mechanism for reporting it, just to even give an estimate and say, okay, you've got X amount in the network and that is likely to be paid at this kind of proportion each month, and that would help us. But certainly it's caused us a lot of problems in terms of knowing like when those things are going to be coming in to us, and also how many are likely to be cancelled. And that's something that we've certainly got to continue to look at over a period of time.
Cool, thank you. I guess my final question for you, Colin, was obviously before COVID, and this isn't so much based around travel, but as your experience as a kind of a well-established publisher that doesn't necessarily have huge financial backing, you've been around, you're well-established, you're well thought of in the channel, but you're still a relatively independent site. How does being a smaller site benefit you? You know, flexibility and what insight can you give to other smaller partners how to survive in the channel? Because I think even before COVID, we've seen this gap in resources between the bigger publishers and the smaller publishers, and that's continued to widen. I think that COVID's probably accelerated that as well, you know. So it'd be interesting to understand like the sort of things that you're doing in order to remain flexible, and what advice you can give to other smaller publishers.
I mean, I'd say it's a bit of an advantage in many ways, because we're not necessarily tied up in red tape or having to kind of jump through hoops to get some changes. So we can be very nimble in the marketplace. So if we see an opportunity, we need to create a new section of the website, or we need to just pivot slightly on a particular product, we can do that quite quickly. And I think that would be my biggest advice for any small publisher is to try and be as nimble as you can, and to test things on a small scale before you kind of expand it out. So, you know, be quick and, you know, experiment as much as you can, and not worry too much about getting bogged down in creating some big, massive product. You know, trial and test. You know, if it works, then repeat and expand. And actually that can gain you an advantage over some of the big guys who are quite often focused on the bigger fish. So particularly if you're looking at quite niche travel products, if you're a blogger or an influencer who has a niche website, sometimes they tend to be more successful because they can focus very, very near to those products. And, you know, particularly if you're looking at content, it's all about intent. You're trying to find those people at the right time who are interested in those products. And if you can do that in content, sometimes it can work beautifully, and you don't have to be a necessarily massive website to make that work.
I'd have to agree with Colin on that. I think that's a really, really valid point, because certainly, I suppose when you are working for a big publisher as well, you have to you've got a lot more stakeholders there, a lot more investment into that product, and it takes time, and product roadmaps are always quite chunky, and you have to prioritize certain things based on that return. So yeah, no, I definitely think that's great advice. Some of the little things that can be done, like whether it's down to like theming, like having tagged pages, or is a way to sort of increase engagement from members spending more on the site. If you're especially around when we were in full lockdown, just having a lot more information around savings that you need rather than necessarily things that you desire to have. I think that was really, really important, and really easy to do. So yeah.
Do you think that sites have taken on more responsibility when it comes to the advice and the savings? They're not just, like you said, not just throwing things out of, oh, this is a great saving, you don't really need it. They've actually taken a bit more responsibility around, well, people aren't necessarily going to have the sort of income that they had previously. Let's try and promote more essential items.
I think they have to a certain extent. I think it's got to have some form of balance, hasn't it? Because at the end of the day, we're all businesses. We need to make revenue, but at the same time, I think there has been a lot more. Certainly, from our point of view, we have all these different ethoses. I'm sure a lot of businesses do, where we need to be human. We need to think at the end of the day, it's employees and clients who we're doing all this for, from our perspective anyway. So I think in order to obviously maintain that level of service and be able to sort of support our clients through difficult times, we've got to put that at the forefront of our minds, and we've got to do that as much as we can. Whilst it doesn't relate to COVID as such, a similar thing you might bring up would be modern slavery. So certainly with the recent Boohoo scandal, I know it's completely going off piste. Certain things like that, where you need to be looking at the supply chain and taking more consideration for the retailers, advertisers who you're promoting on your site. And where they have modern slavery statements, you have those available to share, or you have that right to sort of question, where are these goods coming from in order to support, those customer purchases. I think that's a similar example as to why we need to be looking at what we're promoting, as well as just making revenue at the end of the day.
Cool. Yeah. I guess I want to bring the other two guys back in. It's quite a broad question, this one, but what can we do as an industry to continue to help grow and develop and look beyond maybe looking beyond pure volume requirements and seeing a channel that kind of is a bit more all-encompassing. It isn't a niche CPA. Let's look at how we can make more volume for everyone, but actually, how can we look at the smaller publishers as more referral publishers for the larger partners, etc. If that's the way the industry is going, what sort of changes do you see in the future of coming in that kind of rebalance the industry?
I guess I can take that one. As a small medium publisher, I think there is, it's obviously the industry's changed quite a lot since we've been in it. Obviously, there used to be a lot of bedroom affiliates who got sites up and found, many of them very successful, made a lot of money, made them into proper companies. And I think that's something that's definitely dwindled over the years as the bigger guys have got bigger and merged and grown, and the industry has developed. And I think there is an opportunity to kind of get back to basics and find a way of engaging in those smaller guys. We're very jargon based. We're very, I mean, I never thought I meant to say this, but affiliate industry is very corporate. In many ways, it's still it's a business now. And with all the kind of the more relaxed elements of it, and being in the media, I think it's still very difficult for non-affiliate people to understand. So I think it's a little bit about how it presents itself to independents, to bloggers, to influencers, to try and find ways in which, one, that they can connect with it, understand it, and also believe they're going to be paid. And on the payment side, it has to be a movement on how we measure what performance is, what affiliate is, and look at kind of a wider piece around, I'm a independent blogger blogging about, I don't know, hair clips, and therefore I want to make sure that I get paid for any promotion I do. I don't want to always lose out to an incentive site. So therefore, there has to be a model in place that allows you to measure any kind of influence, and do it in a broadly mathematical, scientific way that works, so that whether I'm sending 10 clicks or 10,000 clicks, my traffic is still valuable. So why shouldn't I be rewarded on it just because I wasn't the last click? And I think that's a fundamental that the industry needs to go back to and find a solution. And I think there's the opportunity for a network to maybe find a solution to that kind of works at scale, and then we will see a new land grab of influencers, bloggers, niche websites who actually might get engaged in the industry.
I think you'll see that, wouldn't you? You'll see any change throws out new opportunities, and this is the biggest change we'll probably ever see. So therefore, you're going to get more. You've got all the influencer side, TikTok and Instagram and all that kind of stuff, and then you're going to have people writing new blogs, and then you have a bunch of people who haven't got jobs, and they'll be looking of ways of creating, working for themselves, trying to make revenue, and it's how they can easily plug into it, because it's not that clear and it's not that simple. And the clearer and easier it is for them to see, if I do this thing, I can see the reward, and it's a scalable thing to whatever point, then they will start to grow, and then you get almost like back to the days of the bedroom blogger kind of thing, because that's actually what you want. You want differentiation. You want people who've got a unique focus on what could be mountain bikes, one thing, and they if you reward them, then they can actually grow that and become more specialist, and then their audience, of course, is more targeted, so it converts better. So it should win for everyone.
Yeah, I think influencers, we keep them a bit separate at the moment, but actually, like you say, it is an understanding of how we can connect them into the industry. They drive traffic without the use of the Googles, the PPC activity, which is kind of what is separating the really big guys in the industry from the rest. It's their resources and their ability to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds in PPC and drive all the traffic towards themselves. Whereas if you take that out of the equation, then actually the influences could be massive within the industry.
They'll do it themselves. I saw one on Instagram the other day. I put a picture up of something, and I got this, collab with this DM, and I was like, "Hey, look, I'm an influencer." And my kid's like, "No, you're not," right? And all they were saying though was, you buy our products, you can get anything you want half price. Anyone who comes in from a link we give you will give you 30% back. So 2 sales, you're done. You've got a free product. That's them building their own affiliate network.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and they're not part of the existing networks just now. What they're saying is, well, they might not be saying I don't understand it. What they're saying is, I could do this myself, and it's clearer, and it's user to user, and it's how do you bring them onto a platform and say, look, we've got all these advertisers that all be interested in your content, and that's a really key challenge, because if the top 1,000 influencers just say, actually, I'll do it myself, that's a huge publisher channel that's lost to the advertisers.
With the amount of money that influencers are making at the moment through their own kind of means, their own way of doing things, are they going to want to come into the affiliate fold? How do you reward them in the same way to continue making that type of money that they're currently making? And I know a small proportion.
It's tiny numbers. Your Kim Kardashian, I think I said that correctly, gets 750 grand a post, but you've probably got this huge long tail of specialists, right? And whether it be, especially you see it a lot in travel, if I see another Instagram picture of Mykonos, I think I'm gonna have to go. But that's the case in point. I've seen so many, I would click the button to book the flight to Mykonos, and it's all these specialists that I think you'll need to capture.
It's about how you bring in the kind of branding, PR world. If you talk to any brand, their PR and branding budget is going to be way bigger than their digital marketing budget. So, that's the opportunity that if you can tap into that and actually measure it, which is one thing that branding and PR aren't necessarily very good at. So, it's a possibility. It opens up a bigger pool of money to then distribute to more people. So therefore, everyone's going to win.
I think the branding message has been something that clients haven't necessarily picked up on within the industry. Since I've been in it, you have emails that go out to a database of 6-7 million in some cases, and they come back and they say, well, we haven't seen the sales that we wanted. But your brand has been seen by however many million of those people opened that post, and they're happy to do it in a pure branding context of, we've got this much money put aside for branding and we're happy to spend it on branding. But when it comes through an acquisition channel, it causes the problems internally, I guess, within the client's business.
Yeah, well, that's the mindset. Sorry.
You go.
I was going to say it's the mindset that needs to change within these organizations, that they actually need to understand the difference between those things and the fact that you can still measure it.
Imagine 6 million people and you're the first advertiser. Right? How much would the branding side of the business have to pay to be 6 million email inboxes at 9 a.m. when people are sitting down for the new chair or whatever, and yet you can actually get that. And if it doesn't generate huge amounts of sales, okay, that's a fair argument. But 6 million people have seen your brand that morning.
So it's like Colin said, it's around mindset. It's also about how the channel's measured.
Yeah,
everything's measured on a conversion rate, on a CPA, etc. Where actually maybe there are scenarios where that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah, I can't remember a time when we haven't been talking about measuring based on interaction or whatever it may be. There's always been a discussion around trying to find another metric, but no one's really ever found a way of doing it in a meaningful way that can be scaled from everyone, from a blogger through to a large corporation. And I think that's the challenge for everybody to try and find that.
Yeah, brilliant. I have no more questions, but I thank you all for answering the questions I did have, and I think we've actually probably posed more questions there than we've answered in the end. But thank you all for coming, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Lee.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Cheers, guys.